Welcome to this explainer. Okay, so we're going to tackle a huge problem today, one that honestly plagues so many language learners and, yeah, even native speakers. I'm talking about choppy, disconnected writing. You know the feeling, right? You read an email or an essay and it just feels robotic, like a car stuck in stop-and-go traffic. Well, today we're mastering the grammar glue that fixes all of that. It's going to give your sentences incredible flow, logic, and complexity. We're talking about subordinating conjunctions.
So here's our roadmap for the explainer today. We're going to mate these conjunctions, look at some sentence structure patterns, and break down the different conjunction categories. Then we'll go over how to avoid some really common mistakes, and finally do a little practice to apply what we've learned. Let's get into it.
All right, Section 1, Meet Subordinating Conjunctions. Let's dive right in by laying down our basic building blocks.
So what exactly is a subordinating conjunction? Well, I want you to think of these words or phrases as critical bridges. Their entire job is to connect an independent clause, a strong, complete thought, to a dependent clause, which is an incomplete thought. Without this bridge, that dependent clause just literally collapses. But they don't just randomly stick things together, they actually tell your reader exactly how those two ideas relate, whether that's through time, a reason, a condition, or a contrast. And this really brilliantly illustrates our foundational rule. Without that grammar glue, a dependent clause just can't survive. Take the phrase, "she passed the exam." Totally makes sense on its own, right? It's a finished thought. But imagine just walking up to a friend saying, "because she studied hard," and then just walking away. They'd be completely lost. It absolutely requires that independent clause to anchor it.
Okay, Section 2, Sentence Structure Patterns. Now that we know what these bridges are, let's look at the architectural rules for where to actually put them.
Now, the crucial point here is punctuation. It's a structural choice that can honestly make or break your writing's clarity. We've got two main patterns. In pattern 1, you put the dependent clause first. It acts like a dramatic lead-in, and when you do this, you absolutely must use a comma as a hinge before delivering the main independent clause, like, "although it was cold, we went for a walk." But in pattern 2, if you lead with that strong independent clause, your subordinating conjunction acts as the hinge right in the middle of the sentence. No comma needed here. You just say, "we went for a walk, although it was cold."
Moving on to Section 3, Conjunction Categories and Functions. Let's take a quick tour of the different types of bridges we can build. What's really fascinating here is how neatly we can categorize all these conjunctions based on exactly what job they do in your sentence. We've got time markers, reason markers, contrast, condition, and so on. Now don't worry, you don't need to memorize this whole table right this second, but just appreciate the sheer variety of tools you have in your toolbox. Let's zoom in on a few of the most useful and sometimes kind of tricky ones. First up, cause and reason. When you're explaining why something happened, you might think because, since, and as are basically interchangeable. Actually, choosing between them depends entirely on how direct or formal you want to be. Because is your heavy hitter. It's the strongest, most direct way to give a reason. Since is just slightly softer. It's perfect when the reason is already pretty obvious to everyone. And as, well, that's your go-to for more formal, elegant writing.
Next up is contrast. This is for when you want to introduce an unexpected or opposite idea. Although and though are your standard everyday tools. But if you want to pack a much stronger structural punch, you gotta upgrade to even though. It really highlights the friction between the two clauses. And finally, whereas is your absolute best tool for pure, direct opposites. Like, she likes coffee, whereas her brother prefers tea.
All right, let's talk conditions. The rule for unless can be a major stumbling block. But here's a super simple hack. Just remember that unless is a perfect substitute for the phrase if not. Let's test it. Unless you hurry, you'll miss the train. Swap it out in your head. If you do not hurry, you'll miss the train. See? It means the exact same thing, but unless is just vastly more concise and punchy.
And really briefly, let's look at showing a result. The rule here is strict but simple. To show a result, you have to use so when you're attaching it to adjectives or adverbs, like, "it was so hot that we stayed indoors." But you switch your glue to such when you're building with a noun phrase. It was such a difficult exam that many students failed. Honestly, mastering this tiny detail will instantly elevate the sophistication of your writing.
Okay, Section 4, Avoiding Common Mistakes. Before we test our skills, let's quickly review some crucial safety guidelines.
The classic double conjunction trap. Look, in spoken language, we sometimes lose our train of thought and accidentally use two joining words. But in writing, it's a structural failure. Never use although and but in the exact same sense. You only need one piece of glue.
Just drop the but if you've already started with although. Although she was tired, she continued working. Done. And the exact same redundancy rule applies here. We see this one all the time. If you start your sentence with because, you absolutely do not need so to hold the second half together. The word because is already doing all the heavy lifting. You just need your comma. Because it was raining, we stayed inside. Nice, clean, and structurally sound.
Now, this mistake just totally messes with the logic of your sentence. Remember our rule from earlier? Unless already contains a negative meaning, it means if not. So if you add another negative word like don't, you create a super confusing double negative that just breaks the sentence. Unless you don't study literally means if you do not study. It's enough to make your brain hurt. Just stick to the positive verb. Unless you study, you will fail.
All right, Section 5, Practice and Application. Let's see how all this theory builds into real-world application.
Take a look at this masterclass example. Notice how beautifully these conjunctions weave together a flowing, complex paragraph. We start with a really strong contrast, although online learning offers flexibility, followed immediately by a clear reason, because they enjoy interacting. Then it wraps up with an even stronger contrast, even though online education has many advantages. By using these structural bridges, the writer seamlessly guides our mind through a sophisticated argument without a single choppy sentence in sight. It's brilliant.
Okay, now it's your turn. Let's test your structural knowledge. Which bridge correctly completes this sentence? We have the dependent clause, it was raining, a comma, and the independent clause, we went hiking. Are you going to use although, and, or so?
If you chose A, although, you absolutely nailed it. Since we're presenting an unexpected opposite idea, going hiking during a rainstorm, the contrast bridge although is the perfect fit. Notice how it perfectly follows pattern 1 too, placing the dependent clause at the start with that comma hinge.
Let's try one more. You won't pass blank, you study. Think back to our specific rules on conditions and those negative consequences. Which of these three options creates a perfectly logical sentence?
Spot on. The answer is unless. It acts as the critical condition here, meaning if you do not study. The sentence structure holds up beautifully, and we avoid any of that double negative confusion.
So now that you understand the mechanics of subordinating conjunctions, you literally hold the keys to better flow, clearer logic, and vastly more professional communication. Seriously, no more choppy sentences, no more double conjunction errors. I challenge you to consciously apply this grammar glue and completely transform your own writing today. After all, if you can control the structure of your sentences, you can completely control the impact of your ideas. So what complex thought are you going to connect next? Thank you so much for joining me for this explainer, and I'll catch you in our next deep dive.